Do you know what separates a struggling entrepreneur from one who goes on to build multi-million-dollar businesses? It's not luck. It's not even hard work. It's habits. The seemingly small, everyday decisions that compound over time to create massive success. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down the exact habits that transformed my businesses and my life. These are the habits that, of course, they don't teach you in school, but the ones that will take you from dreaming to dominating. So without further ado, let's jump right into the details. Lesson number 1, acquire assets. So I became a millionaire at 26 years old. I'm now 32 years old, and my net worth is in the multiple millions. Now, my success is thanks to a number of businesses that I've started over the past decade that have grossed tens of millions of dollars. So obviously all of those businesses are extremely valuable assets. But aside from those businesses, I started buying up and investing in real estate at the age of 26 because I knew that real estate could potentially be the key to building my wealth in a number of ways. The first way is appreciation. So we live in Colorado near Boulder. I've talked about that a few times on this channel. And we actually caught the real estate market here before it started taking off. And during that time, we were very intentional that we wanted to pick up as many properties as we could. And the point of purchasing these properties was to find value add properties. So essentially properties that were in pretty rough condition that either were mismanaged or were unkept. And then we paid to have them renovated. And now we've built up a really nice investment portfolio, and they're all long-term rentals. The second way that we make money on these properties is through cash flow, meaning that the amount that we rent them for is significantly greater than our mortgage on those properties every single month. The third way we make money on these properties is through principal pay down. So essentially every month that we hold these properties and pay the mortgage, we are gaining equity because we know that a mortgage is made up of both principal balance and interest balance. And the final way that we make money on these properties is by acting as a real estate professional. And by owning these properties and acting as a real estate professional, it means that we can essentially take any losses from our real estate business and deduct them against other unrelated businesses. So all of the other businesses that I previously mentioned. Now, because of all of our other businesses, we end up paying a lot in quarterly taxes, and we often end up paying a pretty hefty lump sum at the end of every year. But being able to offset this a little bit is always helpful. Now, of course, all of this takes a lot of money, but the point in saying this is that people oftentimes in their 20s and 30s, they're not thinking long term. They're not thinking about the long game or about retirement or about investing or about building businesses or wealth for the future. So if you want to be in the 1%, you have to shift your mindset from trying to keep up with the Joneses, trying to buy petty things that are never going to get you ahead in the long run in your 20s and 30s, things that don't really matter. And think about acquiring assets that will make you money over time. But if you don't have a lot of money to play with right now, that doesn't mean that you can't get in the game. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I'm all about investing early and often. And that could simply mean starting to invest as early as you can, even if you can only afford $10 per week. Throw that in the S&P 500 and you'll thank yourself in the long run. Now, some other ways that you can get in the game are simply by educating yourself. Knowledge is power. So if you don't have money to get in the game at all right now, then make sure that you're educating yourself now so that when you are in the financial position that you can start investing or acquiring assets, you have a game plan in place. And so what are some good financial resources? So you can follow finance-based YouTube channels like this one. Of course, you can read any number of financial or investing books, and you can also find a good Reddit thread. Lesson number 2, take risks. Now, unless you're a trust fund baby, nobody got rich unless they took some risks. But to be really financially smart, of course, these risks should be calculated. And that's honestly the difference between a successful entrepreneur and one who's going to have to go get a day job. Money, especially in the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey, is probably a limited resource. And exactly what you end up choosing to do with that money will have a huge impact on whether you end up being a successful entrepreneur or not. So for example, I started my e-commerce business, my first business baby, when I was in college getting my second bachelor's degree. And by the time I was out of school and working in the field that I actually went to school for, my e-commerce business income far exceeded any amount that I ever would have been able to make in the field that I actually went to school for. But I didn't just quit my day job immediately. I knew that to grow my business and pay my living expenses, I would need some cash reserves. So I worked my butt off for 3 years, running my growing online businesses, all while working my full-time job. And during that time, I was really mindful in saving as much as I could, and of course, reinvesting as much money as I could back into my businesses themselves. And then only once I had a certain amount of money set aside, did I make the tough decision to leave my day job and become fully self-employed. And then at that point, I started a few other companies. And again, same thing, I reinvested in those businesses for quite a number of years before I felt comfortable using some of that money to start buying up real estate. So you can see that this was a decade-long process. It wasn't something that just happened overnight, but these calculated risks that I took over the years have gotten me to where I am today. So again, don't be afraid of risk, because it's often when you take a risk that you see the most growth. However, make sure that the risks that you are taking are well calculated and that you obviously have a backup plan in place. Lesson number 3, just start. So many people plan and talk about starting their own business someday, and they talk about it for so long that someday never happens. The reality of starting and owning a business is that you aren't going to know everything, especially in the beginning. I mean, I'm even a decade into this and I'm still learning things every single day. And as you all know, I'm a lifelong learner, so I think that's exactly what I love so much about being self-employed. As Winston Churchill once said, perfectionism is the enemy of progress. I would personally consider myself a perfectionist, and that's something that I've really had to work on over the years. So back when I started all of my companies, there essentially is a point where you reach an MVP. You have a minimum viable product that is ready to go to market. So the point of having an MVP is essentially making something that's good enough to go to market and then listening to what the market tells you. And that's true for almost any business that you would consider starting, from e-commerce to software to real estate to even offering a service. Get something that's good enough to send to market and then go from there. So essentially my point here is that people who tend to end up being more successful have more of a propensity towards taking action. They don't wait to take something to market until it's absolutely perfected. They make their MVP, they get it to market, and they listen to what the market is saying to them. So stop overthinking. That is advice from a chronic overthinker, and just go for it. So let's think of this as a real life example. So I personally love to play tennis. I've been taking tennis lessons privately for a few years now, but imagine if you were so intimidated, you were so scared of ever making a mistake while playing tennis that all you ever did was read about how to play tennis. And that's where the majority of people live. They live in this fear, or this what if, this fear of the unknown, so much so that they never even end up walking onto a tennis court. Now, I am not the best at tennis. I try really hard, but I've not been playing very long. And so, of course, I'm bound to make mistakes. But this lived experience of actually playing tennis, getting in the game, is where growth tends to happen. And the same is true of all of my businesses. Now, I joke that I spend probably 75% of my day essentially solving problems or putting out fires. And while some days I have a terrible headache by the end of the day, or my day never seems to actually end, I do realize that this is a huge luxury, because that means that I have been able to hire enough teams of people to run all my businesses for me, while I essentially get to focus on problem solving very specific problems and also figuring out how to continue growing those businesses. And while some days it seems like the problems never stop coming, it feels like since I've become self-employed and since I've built all these businesses up, I've run into enough problems that it's become really hard to frazzle me. I know and I'm confident that I can problem solve. I am analytical. I can figure things out on my own. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about self-employment, is that it gives you this freedom, this confidence, this liberating feeling that you can figure anything out on your own, or you know how to find a resource that can help you. And while sometimes it's terrifying to think that maybe you're the only one that would potentially know how to solve this problem for your businesses, this empowerment and this self-confidence that self-employment has given me has really expanded into other areas of my life and made me feel like I can take on whatever life throws at me. And even if the problem isn't resolved in the most favorable way for you in the moment, at least you can take something from that experience, learn something from it, and then carry that with you forward in life. Lesson number 4, learn to delegate. Time is the most valuable asset that any of us have, and it's taken me quite a while to realize that. It's non-renewable, meaning that once you give it away or once you spend time doing something, you can never get that time back. So as a successful business owner, you have to learn how to make the most out of your time. A lot of business owners are perfectionists and they would love to do everything themselves, but there's just often not enough time in the day. And honestly, it's probably better if you don't do everything yourself. For example, I know almost nothing about coding, and that's why a few of my companies have entire teams of software engineers and developers. So try to narrow your focus every day to things that truly only you could provide or only you could do for your business, and then delegate everything else to your team, to people who probably could do those things better than you can. Steve Jobs famously said that A players hire A+ players, B players hire C players, and C players hire D players. And once you're down into the F players, your company might not even be afloat at all. And that is the same mindset that I take for all of my businesses. I have very high standards for my businesses, and I want people working for me that can do specific jobs better than I can. So it may take me a little bit longer than usual to hire someone new onto my team, but that's totally fine because I'm looking for those really exceptional characters, those really exceptional players that can help me take my business to the next level. So focus on seeing employees not as a monthly expense, but as a return on your investment. Because likely with the help of your team, you'll be able to accomplish much more at a much higher level than you would have been able to without them. And by scaling your business, that's what leads to that millionaire, that multi-millionaire status. And if you can't afford to hire someone right now, maybe you're just starting out. Believe me, I've been there. I totally get it. That's fine. But again, my advice to you is to think about your long-term goal. Is this your long-term play? Are you going to build this business for years and years to come? And if that's the case, then it could be worth cutting expenses elsewhere to be able to start building up your team now. Lesson number 5, embrace being a forever student. Nobody knows everything. I don't care who you are. I don't care how successful you are. Everybody has something that they can learn. And that continual learning is honestly part of the beauty of life, because imagine a world in which everybody knew everything. That would be incredibly boring because your natural instinctual curiosity would be gone. Now, I personally love to learn, as you can probably tell from my extensive schooling, but I feel like if I'm not learning, then I am not growing. And this drive, this passion, this fire to learn is what keeps me constantly curious. And sharing that knowledge with other people over time is what really cements growth and the idea of lasting change. And the other part I wanted to mention here about being a student is asking questions. Now, unfortunately, as a society, it seems like asking a question is kind of frowned upon. It's seemed as an inconvenience. You are inconveniencing whoever you are asking a question to. And as a Midwesterner, I don't know how many times I have actually apologized for asking a question. Now, in business, as in school, people often want to be the very first one who knows the answer to whatever question you're asking. But if you're not careful in business, you may end up answering the wrong question, or maybe a question that you don't even fully understand. So try to actively change your mindset from wanting to be the very first one to provide an answer to being the one who's asking the questions and actually asking questions that matter. So try to swap your mindset from the one who wants to rush to answer as soon as possible to the one who's actually asking the questions. And then try to find a way to ask better questions. And by solving those, you'll likely have a better understanding of the initial problem that you had to begin with. So those are the 5 habits that I have learned to carry with me as a successful business owner over the past decade. Now, I hope if you're in a similar situation, those are helpful and maybe even a little bit inspirational. Let me know how your journey is going in the comment section down below. As always, please do me a huge favor and hit that like button if you thought this content was helpful and interesting. Feel free to subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content just like this. And don't forget to hit that notification bell. Feel free to follow me on my social channels right here, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.